But, so you're looking for basic indicators of compromise that you've got. Hey, there's a thing knocking at the door. Okay, we're aware of it, but it's been prevented. But you've also got to deal with the fact that you only have so many resources to apply to any of those and to maintain them throughout the organization. So you're left with making critical decisions on the fly and making sure that you prioritize correctly and hoping that you haven't gotten breached in the meantime. But the other thing that you're facing off against is time. In pretty much every aspect of life, this is the single most valuable currency that you're ever going to do anything with. You only have so much time with which to do anything, and security is no different. You have so much time. The one thing that you're always hoping for, especially from a blue team perspective, is that I just get to see the morning without having seen my name on Krebs on security. Because, by God, nothing will ruin your day like seeing X company has been breached, 6 million customer client data has been fed to the internet, and that's, well, that feeling's just great, isn't it? So, in this, you're just hoping to make it to 6 a.m. You're just hoping to see the light of day without seeing any trouble, without seeing something like, this face blinking out at you. You're managing whatever limitations you've got in your security program. You're navigating the political climate of whatever organization you're at. I know some are more difficult than others, believe me. But you've got to work within the confines of what you've got. There's a running joke. Has anybody seen the news article that said that, like the Navy's nuclear codes are still held on floppy disks? The running joke that follows that is, would you rather they be plugged into the internet? So, despite everything you've done, if you've done it wrong and you run out of power before the end of the night, this is what happens. The place shuts down, you see these lights, and then you're killed. In this case, even if you're putting people's eyes on glass for every single aspect, every single incident that they have to investigate thoroughly, whether it's a known false positive or not, you're going to burn those people out, you're going to run out of time, and you're going to end up chasing tails and missing something that could actually be relevant. And in the case of a game, you're not going to make it to the next night. You're just going to keep repeating the same day over and over again, which is a delightful feeling from a professional perspective because you'll just end up quitting that job, going to the next one, and repeating the cycle. But we basically have a few steps that we can do in order to prevent these kinds of things from happening and working to actually identify what we can do to improve it. First step, in terms of the game, in terms of security, identify critical assets. What are the things that you need to monitor? In the case of the game, there are 3 robots that you've got to watch. Bonnie, Chica, and Freddy, who's off on the side there. You can't normally see them. But in the terms of security, DNS, do you have a database that has all of your intellectual property? Do you have servers that handle PII? What is it that you're looking at? Identify those and make sure that you've got as many preventative and detective controls as possible. This has to be a balance. You can't just ignore the idea of detection because it doesn't actively block anything. Prevention is a stopgap at best. And I don't know how many people were in Calvin's talk just in the other room just now, but one of the things he said is perpetually true about the security industry. Blue team, if you're on the defense, you only have to screw up once. Otherwise, you have to be right in every other aspect, and you're going to lose. So, going back to a cheerier subject of maniacal animatronics, we've got some monitoring controls based around these guys. We can watch what they do, and we have an idea of what kind of normal traffic they've got. In the case of the game, one of them will follow this left path here to come and kill you. The other 2 will follow this path. And the other side, which is the right side. Sorry, I'm not going to walk in front of the projector because I hate bright lights. So, we've identified our critical assets. We have an idea of what their normal behavior looks like. So we start watching for, little anomalies. Weird shit that goes on. We really don't want anomalous behavior on our network to go uninvestigated, and that's where you've got to understand the ideas behind doing some forensics, digging in, and figuring out what all of those events are going on. The security controls you have in place, when you start seeing this guy, in the game this is right outside your door that you'll see this kind of screen. So that's kind of the time you should shut the doors and make sure that everything is properly configured. One of the ways to lose in the game, leaving a door shut, running out of power. In the same aspect, confirm that everything is blocking properly. You've seen weird traffic on a server. Well, confirm that it's not getting outside of your network. Confirm that everything is still properly in place. Because I can't tell you how many times I've talked to a client and they've said, oh no, don't worry, we have security controls around this, and then a month later, yeah, somebody pushed a bad policy update and data was going out into the internet, and that sucks. To use a line, I don't know if anybody here has ever watched Avatar, but it's one of my favorite lines ever. That's rough, buddy. Then, of course, what you don't ever want to see, oh my god, that looks terrible on a projector, I apologize. There's actually like the rabbit's face, and actually it works out pretty well. But anyway, in the case of the game, you don't want to see this face on the screen. That's exactly that mentality. We thought we had our security controls in place. I thought I shut the door. I thought like our firewall was blocking this traffic. But turns out when our company was bought, they installed layer 2 switches and bypassed all our firewall controls that we had in place. Imagine. But this one's one of the, it got us. We screwed up. Try to avoid it. In the case of the game, it's starting over. Some people that I work with refer to events like this as a resume-generating event. You want to avoid them, obviously. You want to try to stay on top of the security controls you've got in place, make sure that your monitoring's in place, and make sure that you've actually been building use cases in your environment to prepare for any possible things. Read the news, for example. I know this is a bit of a tangent, but this is also kind of how I give talks. So, read the news, figure out what the big breach was, and break it down into basic steps, and replicate that at your company. You'd be surprised how many basic attacks will actually work in your industry or in your environment. You'd be surprised, okay, maybe they specifically couldn't use SCCM to, I don't know, anybody here ever seen Dave Kennedy's Owning One to Own Them All? Yeah, I know you and I have talked about it a couple times, I remember. But it's basically he used SCCM to push out a bad update to every workstation in an environment that opened up a shell for him to use whenever he wanted. So maybe that specifically wouldn't work, but if you break down the actual attack into steps, you'd be surprised how many of those steps will, and any attacker worth their salt would pivot from that and would adjust to make their attack more relevant to you. And one of the other things that we've got to talk about is, as you're building these use cases, as you're reviewing your security controls, is actually maturing your security program. Because who knows when, if you're doing monitoring, people are going to, like, other teams are going to be like, yeah, let's send our logs over to you. We'd like you guys to let us know when something's going wrong. Imagine that, collaboration between teams. But as that matures, you may see other things. And that's where, in the terms of my game example, works out pretty well. Because one of the things they don't tell you when you start the game up is there are actually 4 robots. And this one will run at you and come at you faster than the other ones if you're not watching him. It's delightful. He also doesn't tell you on the first day. He tells you like 2 or 3 days in as a, hello? Yeah, by the way, I forgot to mention this guy, and all of a sudden something like this will pop out at you. It's fun. So one of the things, an example that I'm going to give of that is, as we were working on this and we were building out a use case, we actually did one based on VPN usage and disabled accounts. One of my favorite use cases that I've ever done, because when we did it, and I'm sorry, there is going to be a moving fox behind me, and it's going to be great because I've got movement coming out of the corner of my eyes. It's driving me insane. But when we built this out to see if there were still people attempting to use disabled accounts, yeah, I'm already seeing people's eyes like drift back to that. I'm terribly sorry. I'll go back to this one, I guess. But as we were building this out, we put the actual use case was detecting when people are attempting to still use disabled accounts. Specifically because what if there was an account that we thought should be disabled, like an employee had been terminated, and that it hadn't been properly done? Well, what we discovered was the actual termination process in our organization did not include terminating existing VPN sessions. They still had access, And we could not terminate them because we had disabled everything. A little weirder than that, but we weren't able to control it. Now, we were able to reboot the VPN server, and that killed all of the existing ones that couldn't re-authenticate, but that was still like, and we also had, decent people that were leaving, decent-ish. I mean, they're still, Mondays. But, so we lucked out on the fact that they weren't exfiltrating data, but they could have been. So we had to quickly adjust, fix the process in place for terminating employees, make sure that all VPN sessions are disabled, for example, then disable their accounts. Things like that. But it's that kind of response to it that you need. It's something that pops out at you that, oh man, this is something we didn't even know was going on. And that's where you get things jumping out at you and catching you by surprise. Yeah, it's a GIF. He's just going to keep doing that, I'm afraid. But do the needful. Do your due diligence. Make sure that you follow through on putting in the new security controls and not just saying, hey, we can detect it. It is a balancing act. I personally have almost no faith in preventative controls. I know some people that like to believe that if I put all the walls up, nothing should get in. I mean, hell, in theory, if you don't connect an organization to the internet, they should be the most secure organization ever, am I right? So, in our experience, it was a little better than that, but we luckily didn't have to deal with anything. And then, the last thing that you really don't want to ever have to deal with in an organization when you're talking about indicators of compromise, adding additional threat intelligence feeds, getting more things into it, is dealing with something like this. Now, I know I've got a few people that have played this game, but who knows what this means? This means you've lost. So, at the last night, because there's one other little thing that they didn't tell you about, there are 5 robots. Except that one really isn't a robot, but besides that, there are 5 of them. And on the last night, randomly, you'll see this. And as you noticed, it's the only thing in color. And what it is that big fat indicator of compromise, Jesus Christ, we've been breached and he's been here for months, feeling. That, deep in your gut feeling of, better update that resume. And luckily, something that I recently found out, breach experience is desired. Did not know that. But, joking aside, it's not anything you ever want to see. It's not ever, you never want to be that guy that noticed, oh, this is a rogue process that's been exfilling data for the past month, 2 months, 3 months? Oh, jeez. You don't want to be the guy that has to go to any kind of executive and say, yeah, we're wrecked. And it ends up being something like that. It's something you can never prepare for, and you can only kind of brace for impact when you see it. If anybody here has ever seen Matt Johnson's talk, he's not here, but look this talk up if it's online. Is it? His FBI talk. Matt Johnson had a wonderful experience of dealing with the FBI when he worked for, was it Department of Homeland Security or DOD or something like that? Yeah, no, it wasn't a name, it was something they were working with. But the FBI came to their door and said, hey, we saw your stuff. We're going to be helping you guys out. And he goes through step by step what it was like to deal with that. It's actually a fascinating talk. I, for the life of me, can't remember what it is. But Matt Johnson, FBI, look it up. It's worth seeing. Yes. Oh, thank you. But when you see that poster earlier, that's when you see this guy in the room with you. And he's been there the whole time. The threat is real. He's been there. He's gotten what he wanted. He won the game, and it didn't actually cost him all that much to do. Saying him, but it could be whatever. They've gotten what they want. You're nothing to them but a warm paycheck after that. Now, when you see this in the game, this is game over. You have an indeterminate amount of time before this guy jumps out and kills you, and you've got game over. But luckily, in the terms of the game, you can just start that night over and try again. In the case of a security event, you've got a new tryout when you apply for your next job. And I don't mean it as a pessimistic thing. I mean it as Take the lessons learned. Realize what you guys did wrong. Provided it's not actually a resume-generating event, it's actually a chance to learn a lot of information about where you guys could have improved. I know organizations that don't actually do pen tests. And guess what? There's no example like live experience. It's something that you never want to go through in real life, and that's where pen testers are valuable, and you really should be getting their input on where you can improve, and hopefully they provide you valuable insight and don't just give you a vulnerability scan and say, here's your problem, your cams are all wrong. But in case of that, learn what you can. And the next chance you get to improve on that, avoid any of those pitfalls. Make sure that you get that security program, now knowing more, now being a better person for it, in place in a faster manner. So, I'm going to confess something. Originally, this was supposed to be a case study. I left the employer that I was working with at that time, and I didn't know at the time I could have taken my case study with me. But this was meant to be a much more technical talk. If I give something like this in the future, it will be. That's not really an apology. That's just an explanation of why it's so goofy. The other explanation is that is who I am. I am a goofy bastard, and I'm sorry for having taken your guys' time. But I have a feeling that there are probably going to be no questions, but if anybody wants to discuss things like use cases or security controls, especially surrounding a monitoring program, I would love to discuss those with you. And if anybody catches me wandering in the halls, by all means, I'll talk to you guys. I think I actually made a decent amount of time. Yeah, I've got 12:25. Okay. So, anything? Didn't think so. See? I do know when I leave nothing that anybody really has anything to ask about. But, yeah, that's all I got.